Jake, what's up, man? Welcome to Dad Edge, my friend.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. Normally when I have singer-songwriter musician on here, they sing the entire interview. So you good with that, right?
Yeah, it's great. Let's roll.
Man, it's good to talk to you. What I really like to start with is I love to start with stealing the beauty from just generations past, right? I know you grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, but I would love
Oh,
for you to just give us just a piece of your childhood and just how you were raised.
yeah, my childhood, man. Yeah, like you said, I grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is most Americans haven't ever been to Arkansas. So it's kind of a fun question about like I ask people like, do you even know where Arkansas is on a map? And they're like, yeah. And
Yeah.
90% of the time they're wrong. Um, and this is Americans we're talking about. This isn't even international people. So Arkansas is definitely the unsung hero of the South, I like to say. And I loved growing up there. Like it was very much a small town feel, but the the world headquarters of Walmart is in Northwest Arkansas. So it's this weird mixture of like there's a ton of money in Northwest Arkansas, and then there's only 70,000 people in Fayetteville. So it's like this interesting hodgepodge of like you have access to certain things that you wouldn't typically in like a true small town, but then the culture is totally like a small town. And I loved growing up in that kind of a community where, you know, everybody knows you. And if they don't know you, they at least know your family and they know your
Yeah.
brother and sister and they know your parents and they're, it's just all a really fun thing that I didn't really appreciate when I was a kid. And I think I appreciated it more when I left and moved out to Los Angeles. And I was like, oh, I did grow up in a small town,
Yeah.
and I loved it. I'm glad I did. And um, I'm the youngest of three. I have an older sister, a middle brother, and then me. And so it was a lot of fun all the time. We played a lot of sports,
Yeah.
lots and lots of sports. That was like the thing in our
Yeah.
house. Was my dad was a football coach,
Okay.
and he was working his way up. He assisted at the University of Arkansas, and then he was working through like the high school circuit. And then when they got pregnant with my sister, well, actually, no, that's not true. When my sister turned a year old, he was like, I'm either going to have a relationship with my kids and work a job that I'm not passionate about, or I'm going to keep going down this path and I'm not going to know my kids at all.
Mm.
And he chose to give it up. He gave up the dream and started working at an insurance agency and has made a great living for himself. But he lives and breathes football and baseball. Just he loves sports, just lives for it. And yeah, I think that was just talking about stealing the beauty like that in and of itself was really kind of a powerful example to have from my dad of just knowing from as soon as I could really understand like, oh, he sacrificed a lot to be this involved in my life. And yeah, it was a really beautiful thing.
When did you realize that your dad had made this choice? And I would say not even from like, oh, I just realized it, but you realized it to the point you're like, holy crap, man. Like that was big. Like that
Yeah,
that type of realization.
probably probably not until like high school when I was like a teenage, because when you're a kid you're just kind of like, oh yeah, my dad's at all my games and is the coach of my teams. And then you get into high school and he's literally never missing a practice. Like I'd look up in the press box when I was practicing football and I'd see just like the top of his hat and he'd just be peering through the window and I'd be like, okay, you can miss a practice or two, like I know you love me, you don't have to be this involved, but like uh I think when I started realizing how much I loved music,
Hmm.
which was around the time I was 16, and I just music made me light up in a way that sports never did. I started kind of seeing the parallel to like, oh, this is what sports is for my dad. This is what coaching is for my dad. And he just loves this thing. Like it just really makes him light up. And he chose not to pursue it, because like all of his friends are like the A-list in college football coaching now. Like he and Ed Orgeron were like best friends back in the day, and he was the coach of LSU. They won a national championship a couple years ago and everything like that. So like those were his peers. So he was definitely on track to like go there. It takes decades to get there, but he's I'm really grateful that he was so involved in our lives, and I never literally almost to a fault. Like I was like, you don't need to come to every single practice I've ever done, but I would way rather that than the alternative.
Dude, that might be one of the coolest things I've heard, because it's usually the opposite, right?
Yeah,
It's usually the dad, the husband, they're pursuing their dreams so hardcore at the expense of their family. If I
yeah.
just watched how old are you?
I'm 31.
Okay, so you're quite a bit younger than me, but do you remember the professional wrestler, The Undertaker?
Oh yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Okay, cool. Um, so I just watched this documentary on The Undertaker, and it was a fascinating story. And it almost makes you cry a little bit if you're a dad, because at the very end, it's like towards the last quarter of the documentary, like he talks about like harboring such regret because he lost his first marriage and basically a relationship with his first, I think, two kids. And he's remarried now. He's got little kids again. And he's like, this time around, I'm not screwing it up. But he wholeheartedly kind of admitted that he fell into this trap of pursuing his, not necessarily a trap. I mean, everything happens for a reason. He became a superstar. I think at that point in his life, he was like, oh my God, like there's no reverse gear at this point, right? I got to keep going with this. Otherwise I lose all this. And I think a lot of men will fall into that trap. Your dad chose a very different path, which I think is beautiful and
Yeah,
freaking brave, man. I mean, can you imagine just for a moment, like you're the mecca of well, like your music career, and suddenly you're like, you know what? I think I'm just going to do this. That's hard, right?
yeah. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, when you put it in perspective like that, that's really because like, yeah, it's really hard. It is. I'm very grateful for it. The
But
choice.
but here's the cool thing, right? Here you are, and you can tell just by your body language, just by your voice tone, there's 1,000% of you that appreciates every bit of that.
Yeah, man. Like, absolutely. I mean, I don't even know what my life would have looked like had he not done it, because we would have been moving around all the time. We would have never seen him because, those hours are just insane.
Yeah.
And it would just be my life would look completely differently. Like, I'm so grateful for the fact that he did that. And now that I can see like how much, like the way I feel about my music career, like you just said, to be in the position now with young kids to kind of be like, okay, cool, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go choose a job that's going to be consistent and steady, but I'm going to be uh bored out of my mind. But it's going to be I'm going to be a part of my kids' lives,
Yeah.
and that's really, yeah. I don't even know if I've until this moment really felt the weight of like how much I admired that he did that.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool thing. It's an incredible thing. But the cool thing too is that the day and the age that you and I live in now, right? I've had some amazing, and I'll just share some of the musicians. So I have Mark Roberts from OAR come on, and
Yeah, yeah.
Russell Dickerson came on, and the interesting thing about like when those guys are on tour, right, is that John Cooper was the same way. He's lead singer of Skillet, but his kids are a little older. But he always talked about when his kids were younger. And I know Mark does this, and I know Russell does this, is that when they're on tour, they'll bring the family with them. They're like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
we just create an adventure out of it, right? And the kids remember it, right? Bring their bikes. Like I'll never forget. John Cooper was talking about. He's like, dude, we used to bring their bikes like in our trailer, and then they just wherever we were at, they would be able to ride their bikes and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. But um, as far as going back to your childhood, and your dad was a big sports enthusiast, but then it sounds like for you there was like this shift in like, man, I love sports, but suddenly like music was then an interest. What was that transition like for you?
You know, bringing it back to my dad, he loved great, like he had great taste in music. So he always had good music playing in the house. He loved like the singer-songwriters and the classic rock of like the 70s, you know. So he loved like James Taylor and Bob Dylan and Neil Young and the Allman Brothers, like that whole universe of music. That's what he always had on. So he really appreciated it. And he actually taught my brother and sister and I how to play guitar. Like he knew, he's not like a yeah, I know
What doesn't he do?
he's great. But he taught us like the basics of guitar, and I we all three took to it, but I was definitely the one who kind of like just totally got obsessed with it. And I don't know, man, it was really kind of all at once because I started playing drums when I was like 6 years old. You know, it was that kind of a thing. And it was always a hobby. And I started playing in like church. That was kind of like how I started like getting around other musicians. Because as a kid, I was like playing it, you know, with my friends in their basement, and like none of us knew what we were doing. And then I started playing drums when I was like 12 years old. Started playing in the church band, and then I kind of started learning how like music worked. I started learning how like, okay, that instrument plays that and that plays that, and it all kind of fits together like a puzzle. And then when I was 16 was when I really discovered guitar, and I heard John Mayer for the first time, and I was like, whoa. It was like this crazy moment where I was like, I'm selling the drums, I'm buying a guitar, I want to be John Mayer. And then if you know anything about John Mayer, he's like a guitar aficionado, like he's unbelievable. And I figured out within about 6 months, I was like, I'm never going to play the guitar like that. So I'm not going to chase that dream, but he's a really good songwriter. I'm going to kind of lean more towards this because I feel like there are songs in me. And I think just that moment was really it wasn't when I knew I wanted to be a musician. That didn't happen until later, but it made me realize sports don't do this for me. You know, it was a thing that was kind of almost uh disappointing in a way because like sports was my life. Like I was going to play at the next level kind of a thing, and I was really set on it, and yeah, I was working super hard at getting as good as I could be at sports. And then I remember I was at this combine for baseball. It was like a pro scouting thing. And one of the coaches came up to me and he was like, just think about it, man. You're gonna play 200 games a year. And I was like, and he was telling me this as if I would be like, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. And I just remember being like, that sounds like hell to me. I can't
Right.
imagine playing baseball 200 days a year. And it all kind of happened at the same moment. And I realized, like, oh, I don't think this is what I want to do with my life. Like, you know, every kid dreams of being like a, you know, an athlete or in whatever the dream is. And I realized that I was like, this isn't it. And because I don't feel nearly as excited about this as I do about when I listen to music and when I play the guitar. And my dad was incredibly supportive of it. You know, he was sad. He was like, because I remember it was like, um, I was a senior in high school, and I'd gotten offers to play football, and basically with the baseball conversation, it was like I was I was getting scouted by a couple of different pro teams, and I was in the draft coming out of high school. I didn't get drafted, but I was on the board. I was one of four players in Arkansas that was on the board. And I remember talking to my dad before it all went down, and I was like, I I don't think I want to play baseball anymore. And he was like at all? And I was like, yeah, because like if I know I don't want to play pro baseball, there's absolutely no point in playing college baseball because it's essentially a full-time job.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I just want to go to college and like be a normal person for once. And he was like, I could tell it took him a couple days, but then he came back and he was just like, I just don't want you to look back and regret this. That's all I don't want you to do. It's like, I want you to know that if you make this decision, you're not going to wake up when you're 30 and be like, if I'd have just tried, I could have gotten there, you know? And I can say wholeheartedly, I've never regretted it.
Man, that is so cool. Cause there's so many people that walk or make a big decision like that. And they're like, oh, coulda,
Regretted.
woulda, shoulda, you know, and
Yeah, man.
I can even understand, you know, I know you're your son and daughter is super, super little, right? Shepherd, you said he's only like what, 8 weeks?
8 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my 15-year-old, it kind of interesting, man. So I have a 17-year-old and he's music. So
Yeah.
he's marching band, plays saxophone, guitar,
Oh,
he can play
on.
drums, and like we have a small piano, and like I'll just be like in my office working, I'll just hear him go just start playing, and I'm like, and he's never taken a lesson. And I'm like, holy crap, dude.
He just gets it.
He just gets it. And then I have my 15-year-old who's more, you don't really want to label your kids, but he's more like my athlete. He loves sports. He plays football. He wrestles. He does track. Everything is sports, sports, sports. And I could, either one of those kids as their dad, right? I could, what would it be like for me if either one of them, my oldest came to me and said, hey, I just want to go to college, be a normal person. I don't want to play music anymore, even though I know for him, a dream of his is to play professional music in a band, right? And it was actually kind of funny. I had Nikki Six on the podcast, and
Wow.
I had my oldest Ethan be a part of that.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, because he just wanted to pick his brain, and he told Ethan, he's like, man, if I give you any advice, Ethan, it's this: go get a degree in either entrepreneurism with emphasis in business. He goes, because every band needs a brain. He's like,
Mm.
and I was that for Motley Crue, even though like halftime I was fried. He's like, all kidding aside, he's like, but every band needs a brain. But I could understand from a dad perspective, if either one of those kids came to me and they're like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, I think there'd be a big part of me. It's like, holy shit, though, this has been like kind of part of your identity for as long as I can remember, right? Of
Yeah.
you doing these things. And I could see myself, and I'm sure you could probably see yourself with your little ones, of maybe having that same conversation of like, whew, okay, well,
Yeah.
okay, you're an adult, you're gonna make a decision, but at the same time, just make sure that it's not something you're gonna regret. So, but that's another bold move by your dad. Like, what a way to be supportive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, I think it was hard for him
Sure.
because I think I think part of him always wondered, like, what if I'd have kept coaching, and I think that
Sure.
that kind
Yeah.
of course it stuck with him. But, he was super supportive. And now, like, the way he was so invested in what I was doing with sports, he's as invested with my music, which, it means the world to me. And, yeah, but thinking about that, like with my kids, as I'm looking at them, and because like growing up with me as their dad, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with my career, but like looking at me and being like, oh, my dad's a musician, that's probably going to put some pressure on them to be like, well, I have to do something with music. And I don't want them to feel that pressure at all. Like, if you're not into this, like, don't feel any pressure from me. Like, I want you to do what you want to do, like whatever you like. If that's making spreadsheets, then like go make some spreadsheets and like just crush it, because it's the exact opposite of my brain. But whatever lights you up, like, go for it. And it is, like you said, it's kind of daunting, because I don't know how I'm going to handle that when the time comes, when you know because obviously they're dealing with processing it all on their own, and it's probably very confusing and overwhelming for them. So
Well, let me throw this out at you. And I can't remember. I can't remember where I picked this up at. It might have even been my own dad. Um, but in it, when I heard it, it made so much sense to me. So like I played baseball growing up, and then I wrestled
yeah.
and did martial arts. And for me, like those three, and baseball, it was okay. But martial arts and wrestling, like I had a deep love for it. I coached the kids' teams. I've taught my kids self-defense and that kind of thing. And I got to admit, when my two older ones were like, we want to wrestle, I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. Right.
You just
I was,
lied.
yeah, you're like, good. Yes. Right. Um, but at the same time, like I remember after 2 years of wrestling, Little League, they were 7 and 9 at the time. And they were just like, yeah, we're done with this.
Mm,
And I remember being like, ah, that's a bummer. But I remember my dad, I think it was my dad, said, I don't care what you do, as long as you do something and you love it. Those are
mm,
the two, those are my stipulations. You do something and you love it. I don't care if it's like underwater basket weaving or, like you said, spreadsheets or piano or guitar, or you're on
Yeah.
the football team or whatever it is, but just that you love doing it. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, your dad, me being a father, my 15-year-old in third grade got into football, and that kid has been obsessed with football ever since. He's got such a deep love for that game, and I don't hardly understand it. I actually helped coach it for 2 years, and I became the joke of the coaching staff because I had no clue what the hell I was doing. I just held pads all the time. And but I love the fact that he loves it. And I could, to be honest, I could care less. I'm like, dude, if it keeps you out of trouble and it keeps you mentally, emotionally, and physically in shape, right?
Yeah.
And you're aspiring to something, right? That's all I care about.
Yeah.
I would venture
100%.
I would venture to say with your kids, even though they're little, you would probably have that same type of approach.
Yeah, I hope so. It's interesting because like yeah, right now with my daughter's not even two, so it's like we're very much at the beginning of this. I'm just like already I have this ideal of who I'm gonna be when she's a teenager, and it's like, you start figuring out like what does she like to do? But I can already kind of like me personally, I can hardly sit still. Like I'm just kind of like cool. I need to keep moving, keep doing stuff, and that was one thing I think sports taught me how to do was like if you want this thing, you have to work really hard to get it. Like if you want to start on the football team, you have to beat the guy next to you and you have to do better. And like you can't just sit around eating Cheetos all summer and not work out at all. Like you have to like push yourself. And I'm really glad for that because I've taken that into my music career and I think it's given me a huge um advantage in some ways. But like for me, the thing that scares me the most is to be the taskmaster dad that's kind of like you gotta do stuff, you gotta keep pushing yourself, you got especially of a daughter, it's like I don't want to be the dad who's feels like a drill sergeant. And so but then there's also that delicate balance of like I want you to find like what lights you up, what you're passionate about, what you want to do, and like you were saying, like find something to do that you love. But like what happens if that takes a long time? Like, what if they both just want to try 100 things and not really put much effort into any of them and just be like, "Ah, I got bored with this. I'm going to move on." Like that's the thing for me that I can already feel myself. Like I'm going to really have to be monitoring myself of not being like, well, you didn't really try. Like you got to give it a shot. If you're going to do, that was one thing my dad always said is like, if you're going to do it well
Yeah.
to know if you like it or not. Like if you're going to play baseball, get a good bat. Don't go out there with a toy. Like give yourself a real shot. And like when I got into guitar, he was like, let's go get a good guitar. Like you don't need to be playing one from Walmart. Let's go, buy you a decent guitar and see if you actually like this. And I think there's something to that within measure.
Yeah.
Uh,
100%. I mean, even speaking of guitar, so like I don't have a musician bone in my body. You want to hear something funny? I've been fired by two guitar instructors.
even like, hey, we're done here.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So like one was like I would, it was a dare from my oldest because I would drop him off at saxophone lessons, every week, and I wait for him for 30 minutes out in the waiting room. And one day he was just like, "Have you ever wanted to play an instrument?" And I was like, "Dude, I've always wanted to play an instrument. I just never got, I never did it." And he's like, "What would you play?" I was like, "Guitar." He's like, "Well, why don't you get out of that waiting room and hire one of these instructors while you're waiting for me?" And I'm like, "Challenge accepted." So I borrowed this piece of crap acoustic guitar from my neighbor, and literally like my instructor was like, I was trying so hard on this acoustic, and he's just like, "Dude, why don't you try mine?" He had a Fender
Oh yeah, yeah.
Stratocaster. And
Mhm.
I got on that thing and I was a little better because I was like, "Oh my God, this is so much
You can
easier."
play.
It's like night and day easier to play. Like I couldn't even for me, I was terrible. And then like 3 sessions later, he's like, "Bro," I was like, "I don't think this is for you, man." And then I it was after
Oh,
it
the
was
other
during the pandemic. I hired this one guy on Zoom for a year, and he was just like, "Larry, I'm just gonna be very real with you, man, because like after 1 year and I finally could play Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison, finally. And he's just like, dude, I think you should stick to podcasting. No offense. And I'm
You should let go of this dream.
like,
It's so good.
uh,
That was basketball for me. My dad, I was 12. I remember, and all of the homies were on this one team, and I was part of the team because like
yeah.
the coach was like, "Hey, just go grab the basketball and then give it to this other guy because you can't shoot." And my dad, it was the beginning of like I was about to go start the season, and my dad, 12 years old, sat me down and was like, "Son, you have no future in this game." And I was like, "Dad, I'm 12. What the hell? Like I just
Oh
want to go
my
hang with my
God.
friends." And he was like, "We need to focus on football." But anyway, yeah, I get it. You gotta let go of the dream sometimes.
Oh my God, dude, that is hilarious, man. I could just imagine. Well, I want to transition a little bit. Dude, it's so exciting time for you, man.
Thank you.
You just had this incredible release, new single, Married Young. This came out May 19th.
Yes.
Um, super cool stuff, man. But tell us about the inspiration behind this single.
You know, this is a good question. Like I just finished my first album. So I've
Yeah.
got a debut album coming out this fall. I haven't announced the date yet, so I can't say exactly, but it's coming. And I've been working on it for like a year and a half. And um, I kind of in the past few years since I started releasing my own music under my own name, I did this thing where I was releasing a song every month. I was just doing it one at a time just to build an audience because I was like, no one in the world is waiting for my album, and I'm going to spend all this time dropping 10 songs one Friday, and then everyone's going to listen to it once, and then it'll take me another year to get another album ready. And so I was like, instead of doing that, why don't I just release an album one song at a time and just keep doing it that way and hopefully kind of build a little bit of like a snowball effect.
Yeah, it's a great
And I ended up
idea.
doing that for like 3 years in a row. And loved that, and it really helped me a ton. But now I've actually like done the album thing, and I've got this body of work. And when it came to writing this song Married Young, basically it was a huge eye-opening moment in the whole process of the album, because like the biggest thing I wanted to do was just make an album that felt totally authentic to who I am as a person and what my story is, because like there's so much of the time as a musician, and especially as like a pop musician in LA, like there's this narrative that you hear all the time, which is like, go be young and wild and get around and do your thing, and like don't get tied down, and commitment's not cool and all that stuff. And that just wasn't my story at all. And I've tried over the years to kind of like write love songs that's ambiguous enough to where people can be like, oh, like who knows what this is, but it's like, no, I met the love of my life when I was 22 years old, and I was like, how quickly can we get married? Like I have no questions, I have no doubts, like you are the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And I moved to LA when I was 22. I had just graduated college at the University of Arkansas, and I moved there on a Tuesday, and I met Rachel, my wife, on that first Saturday I was there. I got invited to come play ultimate frisbee of all things with a big group of people that I didn't know anyone other than the one guy who was kind of the ringleader. And Rachel was there, and we met, and it wasn't, nothing happened that day necessarily, but very quickly we started hanging out, and I was like, I am in, I'll do whatever it takes. Like, let's do this. And we got married like a year and a half later, just
Wow.
under 2 years. And that is not a popular narrative in pop music, like you don't hear that story anywhere.
Right.
And so like I've always been a little bit nervous to like, and not out of a place of like being like, oh, I need to hide, the fact that I'm married or whatever. Like I've never been shy about that on like social media or anything like that. But the actual concept of like, yeah, I got married when I was 24, which in certain parts of the world, that's not like in Arkansas, people are concerned with you if you're not married by 24. They're like, hey, you good, brother? But in LA, I literally had people come up to me and be like, you are about to ruin your life. Like, you're actually, this is the worst decision you've made. Marriage is the worst, and you're 24 and you don't know what you're signing up for.
Oh my God.
And luckily, I can say very, very confidently that it was the greatest decision I've ever made. And I'm so, for me, like the biggest thing was, and I talk about this in the song, was like, I know that I have a lot of growing up to do. I know I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. I know I am completely broke, and I know basically nothing about the real world. But why am I going to wait to figure out the answers to some of those questions and feel like I have to do that alone just for some sense of feeling like I did it that way before I, get married or join with the love of my life, when she's right here, and I know this is you, and you're the only person I want to be with. And so, like, let's go through all that together. Like, let's be broke together. Let's figure out the answers to the questions together. Let's grow up together, because you're who I want to be with. And why would I go through those experiences alone when we could go through them together? And
That's so well said.
the best decision I've ever made in my life. Like, I am, it's just, I'm so grateful that I met Rachel so young.
See, you know what's cool, man, is I kind of shake my head at, you ask for people's opinion, you're gonna get it, right? And it just sometimes it's dependent on where you live. I lived in a very small town for like 2 years right out of college because I had to move there for my career when I was and it was the same, it was a town of I think 25,000. And
Oh,
I
well,
never,
really?
yeah, it was in Southern Illinois. And I had never lived in a small town, but it was literally the same thing. It was like if you were not married right out of high school, something was wrong with you.
I was wrong.
And I come from St. Louis, which is still in the Midwest, but people waited longer, to get married.
Yeah.
No one was rushing into it. But I think you really, you open up Pandora's box when people start giving you feedback, right? And I think a lot of times too is that people's approach to it is, it's very telling, right? So like I'll give you a quick example. Like I put a very, and I didn't know it at the time. I put a very polarizing video on Instagram, and I didn't know it was going to be like so controversial. I was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. So my wife and I have been married for 20 years. I've known her for 26 years. Every year gets better and better. And with 4 boys, and um, we
Congrats, by the way. That's amazing.
thank you,
20 years.
thank you.
Nothing's.
But my wife and I have always had this very same belief is that we are married first and we're parents second. And when I say
Mm.
that, I mean, I'm talking like the kids come like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction
Yeah.
after us, right? Like and of course, if someone has an emergency, it's not like, oh yeah, I know you just broke your leg, but I need to go do this with mom.
Yeah.
Like,
Sorry, date night. Yeah.
right. Yeah. It's like people take things to extremes. But I think here's my view of it, that if you put your spouse as a priority, right? Listen, like if I'm looking at the stove, you're on the front burner, right? I'm not saying
Yeah.
kids are on the back burner, but they don't have your spot, right? And I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest injustices that we do for our kids is they have we don't realize this as parents, but they have a front row seat to either a functional relationship or a very dysfunctional one. And it just, which one are we going to show them, right?
Absolutely.
So I put this on there. I was like, hey, if you really want to know the secret to, a successful family and marriage and parenting, you're married first and your parents second. And I explained it that if the,
Yeah.
fraction of fractions is not an emergency situation, yada, yada, yada. And then I had it's been viewed over, I think, 4 million times now. And
Oh,
there's like
wow.
1,900 comments on it. And some of them are very like, throwing tomatoes at me, which is fine. But one guy was just like, well, last time I checked, your kids are always going to be your kids, and your spouse could be your ex tomorrow. And I usually don't respond to stuff like that. And I was like, dude, and I didn't call him dude. I was like, hey man, I get it, with all due respect. I was like, if that's your perception of what could be, that could be your reality.
Hmm.
I was like, if you're expecting that this relationship, or at least putting a perspective that this couldn't work out and my kids are always there, you're automatically putting your wife on the back burner. And
Hmm.
your assumption is we might not work out. On the flip side, like I love the perspective that you had. It's like, why wait? I already know. And if I'm going to go through this, I'd rather just go through it with you. And I think having that perspective versus like, I guess I'll roll the dice and maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see.
Yeah.
No, you were like, no, full steam ahead. I'm with you.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure this out. Boom, let's go. And it's been a success.
Yeah, man. And like, I think if you're sitting around waiting for all the signs to be perfectly right and for you to have the money exactly the way you want it and your life exactly the way you want it and for you to have all the answers to all the questions, like you're just never going to settle down and commit. Like there's a point to it where it's like it's kind of the same way with having kids. It's like you're never going to be ready, quote unquote. Like it's never going to be the picture perfect time in scenario, but it's just like my dad my dad always says like God can't steer a parked car, son, so you got to just start moving. And honestly, like I love that quote because it's true. Like you can't do anything if you're just sitting still. And for me, there were so many reasons that, and when people would voice concern, like it was legitimate, like, hey man, you make almost no money making music, like how are you going to support a family one day? And I'm like, I have no clue, but I know I'm in love with her. So we're just going to figure it out. Like if I have to go work at a desk, I'll go work at a desk. It's fine. I'll just do it. And um it really is for me, it was just knowing that she was the person,
Yeah.
Rachel, it was it. And kind of to go with what you're saying, I love what you said. I wouldn't be throwing tomatoes at you because I totally agree. Like you have to be a unit together first before you then fall into the role that is so consuming being parents together. Because I will say, like, I think your kids need to see that they are the center of your heart, but they're not the center of your life.
Yeah. 100%.
You, like their parents, I think it's really inspiring for kids to see their parents like you are your own person. You have your own life, your own dreams, your own career, you are you. And then you are completely obsessed with me, but you are not living your life through me.
Yeah.
And I'm not the center of your world because a kid can't carry that weight. Like they're not supposed to. They're supposed to be inspired to learn from their parents and take what they liked from their parents and model that in their own life. But if a kid I think if a kid feels that they are their parents' identity, I think that causes a whole nother slew of problems.
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah. And I couldn't couldn't have stated any better than you have. There's a huge theme that came out of what you just said and what I've experienced now that my kids are older is there's this unbelievable feeling of safety when you know your parents are like together and
Oh,
they just like love each other, right? It's almost like and a kid can't my two older ones can articulate it now and we'll be sitting around like my two older ones, this is how I know we're doing things right. My two older ones always want to be home, and that blows my mind. I'm like, you're 17 and 15, like why aren't you out with their friends? Like we like it here, or they bring their friends here.
yeah.
And I'm like, why do you like it here? And they're like, it's we're always happy. Like you and mom are always happy. Like, I mean, granted, we have our moments, of course. He's like, but like, and then I just asked him, I was like, do you think that happiness is there because you get to see two parents that like genuinely with all their heart, like love each other? And well, my oldest was like, yes, that's actually it. Because like the thought of like instability in the family, it's never a thought. And I
Mm,
feel like I can just be myself here
yeah.
and knowing that I have two parents that love each other and love me, and it's great. But I think you're right. Going back to you and Rachel and, figuring it out, and you guys been married now 7 years, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
7 years.
Celebrated 7.
And but two kids now, and you've gone through this journey, right? Of like, I'm gonna figure it out. We're gonna do it. So looking back on the past 7 years, what would you say have been like, this is how we did it. This is how we were successful up until now.
Phew. It's way easier for me to look back and say the things I would have done differently. to be
Sure, of
honest
course.
with you. Because yeah, like the flip side of getting married young is you have to grow up together, and you have to grow up, at least for me. And I'm still very much in the thick of this, is like I have to learn what it means to actually be a man. And now I have somebody who is directly feeling the consequences of when I'm not. Whereas in the past, it's like, my friends aren't actually affected by this, or like, the girls I was dating, like they're not really affected by this, though they are, but they don't have to live with me day in and day out. But like Rachel does, and she's like, hey, like we are together, and I need you to step up in these ways. And for me, like that has been, yeah, that's hard,
Yeah.
because I mean, anyone who's in a committed relationship, like you have a mirror, and all of your shit is at the surface. Like anything in your life that you've been able to just kind of BS your way out of, or charm your way out of, or whatever, you can't do that when you're face to face with someone who's like, I know you better than anybody, and I see all of it, and it's looking me right back in the face. And that's been hard. But I think the thing that we do so well, that I would say, looking back at the 7 years that we've been together, is like we have so much fun together. We are best friends before anything else. Like we're madly in love with each other. Like, and we're constantly, I'm always trying to be really proactive in cultivating that romance and love, and definitely can do a better job of that. But we just, push comes to shove, like we can have a terrible day where just everything's going wrong, and we're stressed and all this stuff, and we're bickering at each other. But then there's a moment where we just look at each other and we just bust out laughing, because we just have so much fun together. Like we just love doing nothing together. And I think that is so crucially important as the bedrock of any like relationship that can last, is just being friends. Because you see people, and you have friends who get in relationships, and it's like, I don't know what y'all have in common, really. Like, do y'all talk when you're alone? And that's one thing that I think that we've never. I think that's one thing, that's the thing that really brought us together at the beginning, was just like we just had so much fun together all the time. Not even in like a super romantic way. We were just best friends, and it's lasted for sure.
I think that's so important. My wife and I just got back from a one-on-one trip, which is like unheard of, when you have 4 kids. Um, I did twist my mother-in-law's arm enough. I was like, "Can you please just watch the kids for a few days? Like it's our 20-year anniversary. Just this."
Yeah, I mean, come on, man. If there's ever a
Yeah.
moment that, yeah,
I was like, "You don't even have to do anything with the older ones. They can take care of themselves pretty much at
yeah,
this point."
yeah,
But anyway, we got away, and Jess and I were talking about the exact same thing. We had dinner every single night, and all of our dinners were like super. I mean, they're always really intentional, but we had very intentional, undisrupted conversation. And we had one conversation in particular. I was like, how do you think after 26 years of knowing each other, 20 years of marriage, like why are we still so happy? Like, and we both landed on one thing, like, yes, we're still ridiculously attracted to each other and all that good stuff, but she is like my best friend and I'm hers. Like, I love just hanging out. Like the way you said it was perfect. I love doing nothing with her. And I've never even heard it said quite the way you said it. And right when you said it, I was like, and that's it.
yeah.
Just like, I just like being in the same room with you. I just like hanging out with you. I like laughing with you. I like, I brought Jessica. She never deep sea fished, and I took her deep sea fishing when,
On the trip.
yeah, on the trip.
Oh, that's so
And
fun.
we just had a freaking blast. Like, and just watching her like reel in these massive fish, and she just had this big smile on her face, and I'm just like, it's just like the coolest thing, and like just being able to be best friends, with your spouse, I think is super important. You know, for you, as we wrap up here, I would just really love to know, like, and I also want to give you some time here to make sure that we want to direct everyone to make sure that they can follow you, that they can make sure they can pick up the album and all that good stuff. But, as far as looking at your career, 30,000 feet above, maybe it's 10, 15 years from now. Um, Believe it or not, your kids are gonna 15 years out, you're gonna have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old like I
I
do.
cannot fathom it. I
Right?
can't.
Yeah, you can at this age, but it's coming. It'll be here before you know it. But like, what are some things that you'll be celebrating when your son and daughter are 17 and 15, and you and Rachel have been married for, hold your breath here, 22 years at that point? But what are you going to be celebrating?
Wow, it's a good question.
I can't play guitar, but I can ask good questions.
Just nailed it. Uh, Man, you asked that question, and the thing that like my mind immediately goes to is like, I just hope I'm close to my kids.
Yeah.
I hope we're friends, like whatever else happens, I still feel like I'm very much at the beginning of my career in a lot of ways. And I have huge dreams to, be the biggest artist in the world. Like, why else would I be doing this? Of course, that's my dream. But like, I would love that Ruby, my daughter, as a 17-year-old, to be able to pick up the phone at any given moment and just call me and be like, one, just she could just want to talk and, have a good time. But like, I want her to feel so close to me and safe asking me anything. And Shepard as well, my son, like the fact that I like, if I get to that point and feel like I'm not close to Shepard and Ruby both, like yeah, I think that would be so like I'm just devastated even at the thought of it, because the other things obviously I have no control over with my career. I can work as hard as I can, and the rest I can't. It's out of my hands, but I can control how I show up with my family, and that I'm not even trying to just lay a softball up for this podcast, but that really is like when you ask that question, that's what my mind goes to.
100%. It's funny. It's as men, husbands and fathers, the things that we chase, the things that we're trying to do in life. When we're asked that question to fortune tell a little bit into the future of what's most meaningful, it's always narrowed down to like the simplest thing, and what you just said, it is a beautiful thing, um, one of the what you're talking about is something that we've been teaching for years now. It's called creating an environment of psychological safety
Mm,
where your kids feel, so that's basically an environment where your kids feel an environment of judgment free, guilt free, pain free, blame free, right? Where they can come and talk to you and just basically unload when they need to, like their dirty laundry, if they need to, or if they're going through something, they have a go to, right? And if you approach your marriage how you approach your kids, you're gonna do that very thing. There's not a doubt in my mind. So
yeah, yeah.
very cool, man. Well, I want to give you an opportunity here. People Magazine has identified you as in spring of 2022 as one of the biggest emerging stars. They call you, I've heard you say, the proven pop maverick, which I think is so badass. I love
Oh,
that.
I've never heard that one.
Yeah, it was in your intro when I did some homework on you.
Oh, amazing.
It's pretty cool stuff, man. Yeah, I know you've been on the Today Show, the Kelly Clarkson Show, Good Morning America. But where can people find you, this album, if they want to connect with you more? Uh,
Yeah.
Anything? Where do they go?
Well, you can find, I mean, my music's everywhere you listen on, whatever streaming service you prefer. I'm there. Just look up Jake Scott. You can follow me on social media, Jake Scott Music. I've been really trying to get the music dropped, but the actual Jake Scott will not give me that handle. So one day we may get there. So it's Jake Scott Music for now. But yeah, I just released a song, Married Young. It's part of the album that's coming, and it's coming this fall, and I'll be touring off and on this fall, but I'll be anywhere you want to find. You can come find me.
You coming to the Midwest at all?
Oh yeah, for
Well,
sure. We haven't announced my headline shows, but I'm going to be doing a lot of international stuff this like late summer, And then probably beginning of next year is going to be when I really hit America again.
Well, I'm gonna Google you, and so like our family, we're all like one of our favorite pastimes as a family is going to concerts. Like literally, it's
Yes.
one of our favorite things we do. So we will absolutely come see you play.
Oh
Uh,
man, love it.
it would be amazing, man.
Love it. I got to come to St. Louis. I've never played in St. Louis, so I got to get there.
Yeah, you can get here. It just even if you're close by. I mean, like, so I'm bringing my 9-year-old to Colorado in August to go see OAR.
Oh,
So
nice.
we'll travel, to go.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, hey man, that's gonna be great. Yeah, next time I go on tour, definitely hit me up. The whole family, come on.
Oh man, that would be awesome. Well, we're gonna have all your links in the show notes. We'll also have a link to your new single so people can go check that out, go purchase it as well. We want to support you. You're a fellow dad, a fellow amazing husband, and our guys love to support that. And so, guys, if you want to connect with Jake, his music, what he's doing in the world, head on over to thedadedge.com/430 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/430. Jake, this was awesome, man. And by the way, I did steal your quote. I love quote. God can't steal a parked car. When you said that, I was like, oh, that's
Dude,
awesome.
I literally live with that in my mind. It's just my dad. God can't steer parked car, and it is. I've incorporated it into my life in a lot of ways, and it's always helpful.
That's awesome, man. You're doing good work in the world, and thanks for sharing the inspiring story about your own dad as well. Super cool stuff, man.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I appreciate you having me on. This is amazing, and yeah, I'd love to come back sometime if you ever want me.
Of course, man. Anytime you want to come back, you are always welcome. Gentlemen, like I said, head on over to thedadedge.com/430 for this show. Go out and live legendary. Take care.